Moscow summer between 1960 and 1990. A street kiosk, a line of children, and something rare in Soviet archival footage. Pure, unguarded joy. There's an old line foreign visitors used to repeat, "You go to the Soviet Union for 3 reasons: to see the ballet, to see the circus, and to eat the ice cream." Rockets they could argue about, steel production they could argue about, but the ice cream, even skeptics admitted it. It was the one thing nobody disputed. In a country famous for shortages and shoddy goods, the ice cream never failed. Never. To understand why, you have to understand a 4-letter word: GOST. GOST was the Soviet state standard, specifications governing how everything was made, from military tanks to children's toys. Most GOST standards described minimums, the cheapest way to make something that barely worked. GOST 117-41, the ice cream standard, was different. It described maximums, maximum cream content, maximum purity. Introduced in 1941 in the middle of a war, it required Soviet ice cream to contain nothing but milk, cream, sugar, and natural flavoring. No vegetable fats, no artificial stabilizers, no preservatives. Think about that for a second. In the same decade the state was rationing bread, it was legislating that ice cream had to be made from real cream and nothing else. This is the story of the one product a failing system somehow got exactly right, and why, 60 years later, grown adults still describe tasting it again as something close to grief. So what did it actually taste like? Ask anyone who grew up in the Soviet Union, and they'll tell you the same thing. It tasted like cream, real cream, thick, rich, almost buttery, not sweet so much as concentrated, like milk reduced down into something magical. The most famous variety was plombir, a high-fat ice cream named after the French city of Plombières. Soviet plombir contained at least 15% milk fat. Most modern Western ice cream sits around 10%, even premium brands rarely pass 14%. Soviet plombir started at 15% and considered that the floor, not the ceiling, and it was cheap. A standard ice cream cost 7 kopecks. A plombir in a waffle cup, 19. For comparison, a loaf of bread ran about 20 kopecks, a metro ride, 5. This wasn't a luxury. It was pocket change for a child, an easy lunch break treat for a worker. The state kept the price low on purpose because ice cream wasn't just food. It was proof, small and edible, that the system could still deliver something good. But there was a catch, and it should have ruined everything. The Soviet Union had a serious refrigeration problem. Most households didn't own a freezer. Refrigerators, when available, were small and unreliable. Supermarkets in the Western sense didn't exist. So how did a country that couldn't keep food cold reliably become famous for one of the coldest foods there is? The answer is almost embarrassingly simple. Nobody stored it. They ate it immediately. Ice cream was produced locally in small factories, delivered fresh to street kiosks, and consumed within hours. No long supply chain, no months in a warehouse freezer, no thawing and refreezing to wreck the texture. That wasn't a design choice. It was necessity dressed up as perfection, the kind of accidental genius that no 5-year plan ever intended to produce, and that no committee could have designed on purpose even if it had tried. And because the GOST recipe had no preservatives, the ice cream simply couldn't survive long anyway. The batch you bought on Tuesday was very likely made on Monday, while the tub in a modern Western freezer aisle might have been sitting there for the better part of a year. Then the Soviet Union collapsed, and GOST collapsed with it. Western ice cream flooded the Russian market through the 1990s. Cheaper, longer shelf life, heavier marketing. Soviet factories, now privatized, underfunded, or simply abandoned, couldn't compete on price. The new ice cream leaned on vegetable fat, usually palm oil, plus stabilizers and emulsifiers that let it sit in a freezer for months. It tasted fine. It tasted like modern ice cream, which is exactly the problem. For a generation raised on real cream, fine felt like a quiet betrayal. In the years since, Chasing that original taste has become its own small industry. Producers who still make plombir to the original GOST recipe advertise exactly that. Real cream, real milk fat, nothing else. Because they know precisely what people are actually paying for. It's harder to find now, and it costs more. But for the people who remember the original, it's still the closest thing left to their own childhood. There was also a kind of ritual attached to buying it. Kiosks didn't take reservations or run out gracefully. A fresh batch would arrive, a small line would form almost instantly, and the whole thing could be gone within the hour. Regulars learned a kiosk's rough delivery schedule the way you might learn a bus timetable, timing a walk home from work to land exactly when the tray came out warm from the van. Beyond plombir, slivoshnoi, and molokhnoi, there were regional specialties too. Fruit ices made with real berry pulp in the south, chocolate-dipped varieties sold as a small luxury, and the beloved Eskimo on a stick, chocolate-coated vanilla that Soviet children treated the way American kids treated a candy bar. None of it came in more than a handful of flavors. Nobody seemed to mind. Here's what actually made the system work day to day. Because the product had to move fast, distribution stayed radically local. A given factory typically served the kiosks within its own city or district, not a national network. That meant no giant central warehouse to manage, no cross-country trucking schedule to keep. Just a short, simple hop from vat to cart to customer, usually completed before the ice cream had time to properly melt in transit. And no, this is not something anyone made up for effect. GOST 117-41 is a real documented Soviet standard, and its unusually strict, additive-free recipe is confirmed by food historians on both sides of the old Iron Curtain. The freshness wasn't folklore. It was simply what happens when a product physically cannot survive being stockpiled. And this is where the story takes its darkest turn, not with tragedy exactly, but with erosion. The factories that had once supplied every kiosk in a city didn't dramatically collapse overnight. Most simply narrowed year by year as cheaper imported product ate into their market. Output cut, staff let go, some converted to other uses entirely, a handful closing for good. It didn't end all at once, it just narrowed, permanently. Today, the GOST standard survives in only a small number of producers, most of them explicitly trading on nostalgia rather than mass market reach. What used to be the default experience of an entire country is now a specialty item. There's an irony buried in that decline. The very qualities that had made Soviet ice cream remarkable, no preservatives, no long shelf life, strictly local production, were exactly the qualities a modern, competitive market punished hardest. A product built to be eaten within a day of being made simply couldn't survive shipping, warehousing, or a 6-month expiration date. Purity, in the end, wasn't a competitive advantage. It was a liability the moment the state stopped forcing everyone to compete on the same terms. If you're finding this as fascinating as I am, hit subscribe. There's a lot more behind this curtain. And yet, every great product collects a myth, and this one has a persistent one. Somewhere in the Kremlin, the story goes, there was a secret ice cream, a special recipe reserved for the Politburo that ordinary citizens never got to taste. What nobody telling that story usually checks is what's actually on the record. Kremlin banquet menus from the Brezhnev years, the ones served to visiting heads of state, did include plombir, cranberry plombir specifically, at more than one state dinner. So yes, Soviet leadership ate ice cream at the same tables where they served caviar and sturgeon to foreign presidents. But there's no documented evidence of a separate, secret recipe unavailable to anyone else. Soviet ice cream was, by design, the same for everyone. A factory worker and the general secretary technically ate the same GOST standard product. In nearly every other part of Soviet life, the elite genuinely did eat better meat, drive better cars, shop in stores ordinary people couldn't enter. Ice cream was the rare exception, which is exactly what made the myth of an even more exclusive version so oddly satisfying to believe. A Russian food magazine eventually put the nostalgia itself to a blind test, comparing modern GOST to standard plombir against premium Western brands like Haagen-Dazs and Ben and Jerry's. The GOST version didn't win outright. It didn't lose either. Tasters called it simpler, cleaner, more honest. One professional pastry chef put it bluntly, it tasted like one thing, milk, while everything else on the table tasted like a chemistry experiment beside it. That result quietly undercuts both versions of the myth at once. The fantasy of a secret elite recipe, and the opposite fantasy that Soviet ice cream was simply better in some objective, undeniable way. It wasn't magic. It was one narrow set of rules, followed without exception for 70 straight years, which turns out to be its own kind of magic. Just a duller one than a secret Kremlin freezer. That's really the whole legacy in one sentence. Soviet ice cream was never trying to be exciting. It wasn't chasing salted caramel cookie dough swirl. It was simply trying to be ice cream, as plainly and completely as possible. And for 70 years in a system that failed at bread, meat, and shoes, that one narrow, stubborn success held. Compare that to almost any other Soviet product line. And ice cream stands out as the single item where adequate was never considered good enough. Nobody had to explain why that mattered. Everyone who tasted both versions already knew. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with losing something small. Everyone expects to mourn the big things, the buildings, the statues, the ideology itself. Almost nobody prepares to mourn a paper wrapper and a factory stamp. But 60 years later, grown men and women in Moscow, in Kyiv, in Tashkent, in Riga, will tell you with real tears that the best ice cream they ever tasted came from a street kiosk in a country that technically no longer exists. Nobody grieves a 5-year plan. Nobody lines up in the rain for a fond memory of a ration card. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a curiosity, or just an appreciation for the small things that survived the collapse of empires, do one simple thing before you go. Hit subscribe.